My wife cheated on me with our neighbor, and now she's trying to claim half of our $750, $0 house and $200, $0 in savings. She's even suing me for emotional damages after I caught her. But the real shocker is I found out she was secretly planning to sell the house behind my back to cover her debts. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, typing out a story about my wife cheating on me and how everything fell apart. But here I am. It all started with what seemed like small signs, nothing too obvious at first. My wife Lisa had always been a bit bitchy, quick to throw a tantrum if things didn't go her way, but I chalked it up to stress or her having a bad day. She's the kind of woman who always has an excuse ready, blaming her bad mood on work, on me, on the world. Still, I never suspected she was capable of the kind of betrayal she was about to reveal. Things had been tense for a while, honestly. We'd been together for over 10 years, living in this big, beautiful house worth around $750, $0. We had a sizable savings account, about $200, $0, and I'd always believed we were solid, stable. But I started noticing small cracks. She was secretive about her phone, hiding it when I came near, deleting texts, making excuses about work emails. She'd come home late, smelling different, not just perfume but something else I couldn't quite place. Her attitude towards me shifted from affection to indifference, and she'd snap at me over minor things, like I was annoying her for existing. The real shock came one evening when I decided to check her phone after she went to bed. I'd had this gut feeling for weeks, and I finally gave in. I unlocked her phone, expecting maybe some work-related stuff, but what I found was a string of messages that made my stomach turn. There were texts from the neighbor, Mark, a guy I'd always trusted as a decent, friendly guy. The messages weren't just friendly, they were flirty, intimate even. She was talking about meeting up, about how much she needed a break from the bullshit at home, and how Mark made her feel alive again. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I married, was cheating on me with that same neighbor who had always been over for barbecues, who'd even helped us fix the fence last summer. It was a punch to the gut. I stared at the screen, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. My mind raced. How long had this been going on? How many times had I been blind? I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't ready yet. I needed to process this to figure out what to do next. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, heard her lies about being just friends with Mark, how she'd deny everything if I asked. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I needed answers. I woke her up early, sat her down, and told her I knew about the affair. Her reaction was classic Lisa. She threw a fit, called me crazy, said I was paranoid, that I was overreacting. She insisted she loved me, that Mark was just a mistake, and that I was blowing things out of proportion. But I wasn't stupid. I saw through her lies, her bitchy smirk, her defensive tone. She tried to deny the obvious, but I had the proof right there on her phone. That confrontation was like opening Pandora's box. I felt a mixture of anger, hurt, and disgust. How could she do this? How could she betray me after all these years? I thought about the house, our savings, everything we'd built together. I felt like I was in some bad movie, but it was real. I couldn't believe I'd married a woman who could lie so easily, who could cheat behind my back for months while pretending everything was perfect. The worst part was knowing she was planning to sell the house behind my back to cover her debts. More lies, more betrayal. That's when I realized this wasn't just about infidelity. It was about betrayal on every level. I knew I had to do something. I just didn't know what yet. After that first confrontation, everything changed. Lisa kept up her act, crying, denying, throwing tantrums like she was the victim. She spun this web of lies about how I was crazy, how I was accusing her of something she didn't do, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I had the proof on her phone, and I knew she was lying. Still, I played it cool, pretending I was giving her a chance to come clean. Deep down, I was furious. I couldn't believe I'd been played for a fool for so long. I started digging into her finances, trying to understand how deep this all went. That's when I found out about the debts she'd been hiding. She had accumulated some credit card debt, Nothing crazy, maybe $20, $0, but enough for her to be desperate. She'd been secretly borrowing money from friends, even trying to sell small valuables. But what really floored me was the fact that she'd been planning to sell our house behind my back. I found emails and messages from her to a real estate agent discussing how she'd get out of this mess by selling the property I thought we owned together. She'd been scheming for months, trying to cover her tracks. That's when I realized I'd been a fool. She was not just cheating on me, she was actively trying to wipe us out financially. I felt betrayed on every level, not only by her infidelity but by her betrayal of what we had built. I couldn't believe she'd be so selfish, so manipulative. I felt the anger boiling up, but I also knew I had to act smart. I started gathering everything: texts, emails, bank statements. I wanted to know exactly what she was up to before I made my move. The more I learned, the more I realized I was sitting on a powder keg. I decided I needed legal counsel. I called a lawyer who specialized in family law and property disputes. I explained everything: her affair, her secret debts, her plan to sell the house. The lawyer told me I had a strong case to protect my assets, especially since we had a prenuptial agreement that clearly defined the house as joint property. But I also knew I had to be careful. Lisa was bitchy, manipulative, and she'd lie her way out of anything if she thought she could get away with it. I couldn't just confront her again without a plan. I had to be strategic. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, pretending everything was fine, even trying to guilt me into working things out. She'd cry, say she was sorry, claim she loved me, but I saw through her. I saw the way her eyes darted around, the way she avoided eye contact when I mentioned the house or her debts. She was trying to spin her lies, but I was done being naive. I knew she was planning her next move, probably to try and turn this around and make me look like the bad guy. I stayed quiet, biding my time, waiting for the right moment to strike back. One night I caught her again, sneaking around her phone, trying to delete messages between her and Mark. That's when I snapped. I took screenshots of everything. I knew I couldn't let her destroy us without a fight. I realized that if I wanted to protect what was mine, our house, our savings, I'd have to be ruthless. I started preparing for a showdown, knowing that the truth was finally out and there was no going back. I was angry, hurt, and determined to get what I deserved. I didn't marry her to be played like a fool, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let her walk away with half of everything we had built. Now, I just had to figure out how to turn this chaos into my advantage. Once I had all the evidence, her texts, her emails, her plans to sell the house, I knew I couldn't keep quiet anymore. The first thing I did was schedule a meeting with my lawyer. I laid everything out on the table: her affair with Mark, her secret debts, her scheme to sell the house behind my back. The lawyer was pretty clear. With the proof I had, I stood a strong chance of protecting my assets. But I also knew Lisa wasn't going to go down without a fight. She was bitchy, manipulative, and she loved twisting things around to her advantage. I decided I needed to confront her again, not to argue, but to get her on record. I told her I knew everything, that I had the proof, and that I was going to take legal action if she didn't come clean. Her reaction was classic Lisa. She burst into tears, claiming she was sorry, that it was just a moment of weakness, and that she never meant to hurt me. She said she loved me, that she was just overwhelmed, that Mark was just a distraction, but I wasn't buying any of it. I'd heard enough. Lies. Her tears didn't move me. I was too angry, too betrayed. That night I started planning my next move. I contacted a real estate agent to get an appraisal of the house. I wanted to know exactly what it was worth, and I wanted to see if she'd actually gone through with her plan to sell it. Meanwhile, I also had to prepare for the legal battle. I made copies of everything: every email, every message, every piece of financial evidence. I wanted to be ready for her next move because I knew she'd try to spin this into some kind of victim story. That's just who she is. She's good at lying, good at manipulating, and she's not above playing the victim to get her way. In the meantime, Lisa kept up her act. She'd come home pretending everything was normal, but I saw the cracks. She'd get defensive if I brought up the house or her debts. She accused me of not trusting her, of trying to control her. But I wasn't falling for her lies anymore. I knew her game. I knew she was planning something, probably to try and turn the tables on me. Maybe she thought if she cried enough or played the victim, I'd back down, but I wasn't backing down. I was done being played. One evening, I decided to do a little digging into her bank accounts. I wanted to see if she'd been hiding money, if she'd been siphoning funds to cover her debts or fund her affair. Sure enough, I found transfers to an account I didn't recognize. She'd been secretly saving money, probably to prepare for her escape. The amount wasn't huge, but it was enough to make me realize she was planning to leave, possibly with the house, or at least to try and drag me through a messy divorce. That's when I knew I had to act fast. I contacted a divorce lawyer, and we drafted a plan to protect our assets. I also made sure I had the upper hand legally. I filed a motion to freeze the house's sale, citing that I had evidence of her scheming behind my back. I wanted to ensure she couldn't sell or transfer the property without my consent. I also sent her a formal notice that I was aware of her debts and her plans to sell, warning her that any attempt to do so would be illegal. Throughout all of this, Lisa continued to deny everything, throwing tantrums, accusing me of ruining her life. She said I was overreacting, that I was crazy, that I was jealous. But I knew better. I'd seen the proof. I knew her lies, her manipulations, her bitchy attitude. I was angry, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. I was finally taking control of the situation. For months, I'd been blind, trusting her, believing her lies. Now I was on the offensive, fighting to save what was mine and to hold her accountable. I didn't know exactly how this was going to end, but I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to protect my house, my savings, and my dignity. The game was on, and I was ready to play it to the end. The legal battle was just starting to heat up, and I could feel the pressure mounting. Lisa was still trying to play innocent, acting like I was overreacting and that I was the one causing all the chaos. She'd throw tantrums, scream, accuse me of being paranoid, all while trying to spin her lies. But I had the evidence. I had everything laid out in black and white, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this one. One day, I caught her red-handed trying to contact the real estate agent again. She was desperate to push forward with selling the house, even though I had already filed the legal paperwork to freeze the sale. I confronted her right then and there. Her bitchy smirk faded when she saw I had the screenshots of her messages, and her eyes darted around like a cornered animal. She started to yell, claiming I was ruining her life, that she deserved to do what she wanted with her own money, even if it meant selling the house from under my nose. That was the moment I realized how far she was willing to go. I decided I needed to take more drastic steps. I contacted my lawyer again, and we filed an emergency injunction to stop her from selling or transferring the property. I also demanded full disclosure of her debts and any assets she was hiding. I knew she'd try to hide her money or make some sneaky move, so I wanted everything documented. Meanwhile, Lisa was losing her mind, calling me every name in the book, accusing me of destroying her life, and claiming I was crazy for going this far. The next few days were a whirlwind. I had to prepare for depositions, gather more evidence, and coordinate with the lawyer. I also kept a close eye on her bank accounts and social media, just in case she tried to make a run for it or cover her tracks. I wasn't about to let her slip away with everything we'd built. The house, the savings, her secret debts, they all belonged to us both, and I was determined to see that protected. Meanwhile, Lisa's attitude grew even more bitchy and manipulative. She started throwing fits, claiming I was trying to ruin her, that I was jealous of her affair with Mark, and that I was controlling. She'd cry, scream, and accuse me of being the villain in her story. But I knew better. I saw through her lies. I knew she was planning something, maybe even trying to find a way to sell the house behind my back or drain the savings. I had to stay one step ahead. One afternoon, I decided to confront her directly about her plans. I told her I knew about her debts, her secret accounts, and her scheme to sell the house. I warned her that if she tried to go through with any of it, I'd make sure she paid the legal price. Her bitchy attitude didn't waver, but I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew I wasn't messing around anymore. I'd caught her in her web of lies, and I was ready to untangle it for good. By now, I was emotionally drained. I'd gone from feeling betrayed and hurt to feeling angry and determined. I couldn't believe the woman I married had been secretly planning her escape for months. It was like discovering she'd been pretending to be someone else all along. I felt a mix of sadness, rage, and resolve. I knew the coming weeks would be the most intense part of this ordeal, but I was ready. I wasn't going to let her take everything from me without a fight. The stakes were too high, and I had too much to lose: my house, my savings, my sanity. I had to win this no matter what it took. The legal proceedings dragged on, and every day felt like a new battle. Lisa was relentless, trying to manipulate the situation, throwing every tantrum she could to sway public opinion or get the judge to side with her. She was bitchy, aggressive, constantly lying, and whenever I saw her, I could tell she was panicking. Her plan to sell the house behind my back had been thwarted, but that didn't mean she'd give up easily. She kept trying to find loopholes, pushing every button she could. One day, I caught her trying to meet with the real estate agent again, supposedly to discuss some minor repairs. I had already told my lawyer to watch her closely, and she was caught red-handed trying to push forward with her plan. That's when I realized she was capable of anything. She was desperate, cornered, and willing to lie her way out of any situation. I knew I had to stay calm but firm. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about making sure she didn't get away with her lies. I decided to go full force. I hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her. Turns out, she had been secretly talking to some shady lenders, trying to borrow money under the table to cover her debts and fund her escape. I found out she'd been trying to set up a new bank account, maybe to transfer funds or hide assets. It was clear she was planning to run, and she was willing to lie, cheat, and manipulate anyone to do it. Meanwhile, I stayed focused on my legal strategy. I demanded full financial disclosure, and I pushed for a court order to freeze any assets she was hiding. When she saw I was serious, her bitchy facade cracked a little. She started to lash out more, accusing me of destroying her life, claiming I was crazy for going this far. But I didn't care anymore. I'd seen enough lies, enough betrayal. I knew her game, and I was ready to expose her. The worst part was seeing her act like she was the victim, crying and whining about how unfair everything was. She'd say I was trying to control her, that I was jealous of her affair, and that I was ruining her future. That's when I realized how much she'd twisted the truth. She was trying to manipulate everyone around her, her friends, the judge, even me, into believing she was the innocent victim. But I knew better. I had the proof, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. In the middle of all this chaos, I started to question everything. I wondered how I'd been so blind for so long. I thought about the house, the money, the years we spent together. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and anger, sad that I'd trusted her, angry that she'd betrayed me so badly. But I also knew I had to stay focused. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about protecting what was mine. I was determined to win this fight, no matter how dirty she played. Every day brought new surprises, new lies, new manipulations. But I also felt a sense of clarity. I knew her secrets now, and I knew I had to stay strong. The house, the savings, her debts, they all had to be protected. I'd come too far to let her walk away with everything. This was my life, my home, and I wasn't going to let her destroy it without a fight. The next move was critical, and I was ready to make it count. By the time the court date finally rolled around, I was exhausted but determined. Lisa's manipulative tactics had only escalated. She was still crying foul, claiming I was trying to ruin her, insisting that her affair with Mark was just a mistake, and that she deserved her share of the house and savings because she'd contributed for years. But I had the evidence, screenshots, emails, bank statements, everything. I knew her game, and I was ready to fight dirty if I had to. I sat through the hearing listening to her bitchy, false accusations, knowing that the truth was on my side. The judge listened carefully, and I could see her eyes narrowing as Lisa spun her web of lies. But when I presented my evidence, her secret plans, her debts, her attempts to sell the house behind my back, the judge saw through her. It was clear she'd been scheming, manipulating, and lying to cover her debts and her affair. The court ruled in my favor, issuing an order to freeze the sale of the house and to force her to disclose all assets and debts. It was a decisive victory, and I finally felt some relief. In the aftermath, Lisa's bitchy facade crumbled completely. She was left with nothing. No house, no savings, no way to spin her lies anymore. She tried to play the victim, but it was obvious she'd lost control. She was bitter, angry, and humiliated. I didn't gloat or rub it in. I just felt a strange sense of closure. I'd been betrayed on every level, but I'd fought back and won. I realized that sometimes the best revenge is simply standing your ground and making sure the truth comes out. The house was eventually sold at auction, and I used the proceeds along with my savings to start over. I moved into a smaller place, far away from the chaos and betrayal. I learned a lot from this nightmare, about trust, about manipulation, about resilience. I learned that if someone is willing to lie, cheat, and scheme to get what they want, you have to be just as ruthless to protect yourself. As I sit here reflecting, I realize that I'm finally free of her. I don't miss the lies, the drama, or the betrayal. I do miss the life I thought we had, but I know now that it was built on lies. Moving forward, I'll be more cautious, more guarded, but also more aware of what true loyalty and honesty look like. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the signs. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. And never be afraid to fight for what's yours. Sometimes the only way to get justice is to take control, stand firm, and make sure the truth prevails. Because in the end, honesty and integrity are what really matter, even if it costs you everything in the short term.